Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Cancel Rent series. I'm Anamika, and I'm coming to you live from Oakland. I am national staff at Right to the City Alliance, which is a national alliance of over 80 housing, racial, economic, and environmental justice organizations joining forces with a whole cast of socially engaged artists via Artivist Entertainment to launch a 10-day online concert series. Welcome to our Cancel Rent Festival. With the coronavirus crisis, millions of people are unemployed and will be unemployed, unable to make rent, mortgage payments, etc. on May 1st, May 15th, whenever people pay rent, which is why under the Beyond Recovery Homes for All campaign, we're calling on politicians to cancel rent, cancel mortgages, and ensure homes for all for renters, homeowners, small businesses, and people experiencing homelessness during the duration of this public health and economic upheaval. Lastly, we're asking to ensure a 3-month recovery period. If this speaks to you, if you're not able to make rent or mortgage payments come May 1st, May 15th, or in the coming weeks, please be sure to visit cancelrent.us and sign on to the list of demands. We are demanding no new debts with immediate cancellation of rent, mortgage, and utility payments, Homes for All, which is a moratorium on evictions, foreclosures, and anti-homeless ordinances, that people must be able to stay in their homes, the unhoused must be housed, and people need to be released from cages, and that vital public good and utilities should be restored to all homes. Lastly, we are demanding that all people, regardless of status, must have access to sick time, worker protections, and basic income for all. Collectively, all of us and each of you can pressure politicians in your city and state to meet those demands with unified action. The first step is to sign on to the demands at cancelrent.us. The second step is by sharing the Cancel Rent Festival on all social media platforms with the hashtags #CancelRent, #CancelMortgages, and #HomesForAll. The Cancel Rent Festival will be broadcasted Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time. And on the weekends, we'll be having 2 concerts daily at 2 p.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. Eastern time, and 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time. To stay updated, subscribe to Right to City Alliance on all social media platforms. Thank you so much once again for joining us for the Cancel Rent Festival. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Leslie from Artivist Entertainment to introduce the artists.
Hi all. I'm not from Artivist Entertainment, but I do appreciate all the musicians who put together the concert series, and I'm excited to be part of this Cancel Rent Festival. Can you hear me okay? Yes, okay. And yeah, so today is about art as resistance, and I'm super excited to be here with Melanie Cervantes and Lisa Tiny Gray Garcia, 2 of my sheroes, artists. We all live in Ohlone territory, also known as the village of Huichin and Lishan, otherwise known as the Bay Area. So I'm super excited to be here talking with them about what's going on locally and nationally. Just to give a little bit of rundown on what we want today to look like. I'm gonna just kind of open it up and give you an overview of the artists, show some of the work I've done, and then all the Melanie and Tiny will present some of their work. And then we want to open it up to a conversation and a Q&A. Please put your questions in the chat box on the side. Those of you who aren't presenting, please turn off your videos. Okay, just checking, am I on the feed, my video? Yeah, okay. Melanie Cervantes lives in the San Francisco Bay Area, where she creates visual art inspired by people around her and her community's desire for radical social transformation. Her intention is to create a visual lexicon of resistance to multiple oppressions that will inspire curiosity, raise consciousness, and inspire solidarities among community struggle. In 2007, she co-founded Dignidad Rebelde, a graphic arts collaboration that produces screen prints, political posters, multimedia projects that are grounded in third world and indigenous movements that build people's power to transform the conditions of fragmentation, displacement, and loss of culture that result from histories of colonialism, patriarchy, genocide, and exploitation. Their purpose is to illustrate stories of struggle, resistance, and triumph into the artwork that can be put back into the hands of communities who inspire it. Lisa Tiny Gray Garcia, AKA Tiny, is a formerly unhoused, incarcerated poverty scholar, revolutionary journalist, lecturer, poet, visionary, teacher, and single mama of Tibu, daughter of a houseless disabled Mama D, and a co-founder of Poor Magazine, a publication, arts, and education project started in 1996 by an indigenous landless mother and daughter who struggle with extreme poverty, incarceration, and criminalization in the US. In 2011, she co-launched the Homefulness Project, a landless people self-determined land liberation movement in the Ohlone Lishan Wichin territory, known as Deep East Oakland, and co-founded a liberation school for children called Decolonize Academy. In 2016, she launched the Stolen Land Hoarded Resources Tour through Turtle Island with First Nations leaders and fellow poverty scholars, where poor people tour rich neighborhoods across the US, knock doors, and humbly ask wealthy hoarders to redistribute their hoarded money and assets. And they can share more about what they're working on when we get there. So I'm playing a dual role today. I'm going to be moderating and also sharing work. So I'm going to introduce myself. I'm an artist and organizer, focus on designing creative actions and tactics, bringing people together, usually collaboratively, to talk about, to highlight stories of people that are oppressed, people that are being evicted and displaced, folks that are homeless, and bringing more joyful militancy to our movements. So I want to start today, just to figure out this screen share. Let's see here. Is that working? Okay. So I got here in about 2008 when the banks and real estate industry had crashed the market. And building out from that, there was a movement called US Uncut in 2011 that was an anti-austerity direct action movement that started in the UK called UK Uncut, taking on tax dodging corporations and banks. And this is one of the actions that we did on a tax day in 2011 with the Brass Liberation Orchestra and all sorts of people taking it over. And these were the fake checks that I made for the movement that was bringing attention to all of the public programs that could be saved for education, for poor folks, for things like heat to stay on, if these richest of the rich who helped cause the crisis would simply pay their share. So this group of folks, it was, I don't know, maybe 9 months, the movement before it sort of morphed into Occupy. It laid a lot of the groundwork for some of the narrative that helped build up to the Occupy movement. And what was happening, also tech was leading, a lot of my work focused on tech exploitation and how that plays out with our homes. And it's most tangibly felt in the Bay Area where Silicon Valley is, but it's spreading out to cities all over Austin, Seattle, even Boulder, Colorado. So places where tech take over, people see the tangible impacts that it has on displacing people. But before some of the actions against tech directly talking about evictions happened, we were talking about their tax dodging. They were the main ones pushing the US for a tax holiday to bring back their hoarded wealth for pennies on their billions that they stored in the Cayman Islands and things like that. So we use a lot of humor. I'm going to just clarify that I'm going to say we a lot and try to talk about the groups that I was directly working with. The work that I'm showing is stuff that I designed in conversation and collaboration with these different groups. So this is us interrupting Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference using QR codes, which we thought were really ridiculous at the time. But people believed us at first that we were a marketing campaign that was part of Apple, and would direct them to the website where we expose what that they were trying to bring back $4 billion for chump change. So that was in 2011. Occupy happened. It's a beautiful movement that brought together a lot of different issues at the same time, and I think I've learned a lot from it, and I'm seeing places where right now is a moment that all of the different issues are interconnected: climate, immigrant justice, abolition, homes. So I'm looking back over this past work and thinking through like how we tie these together. And I do think Homes for All and cancel rent and no cages, get folks out of cages and into homes is a really great place to start. In 2013, a group of friends, mostly queer artists, going by Heart of the City Collective, we rented a fake Google bus and put it in the Pride Parade, registered as Queer Techies for Open Source Technology, to try to put the gentrification of the city and Pride itself on parade it through town. Brian Whitty had made the first Ellis Act eviction map that you see here. Was the first time we had the numbers visualized. So we rolled that behind this bus, and you can see on the bottom right was Google coming right behind us. And that was a tactic, just to try to build awareness. Clearly, it didn't stop the problem. And then later that year in December, we escalated to blocking them. So this was with a lot of groups, including Gay Shame, Senior Disability Action, many folks in the Anti-Displacement Coalition in San Francisco. And yeah, it made huge news. We're talking about the takeover of public infrastructure and how this private infrastructure of violence using our public bus stops actually drives up rents and has a very tangible impact on realtors, and landlords charging exponentially more around these bus stops. And the tactic kind of went viral, and we kept doing it too. It was really the only tangible thing that was on our streets that everyone could see, that was a symbol of the class divide, the haves and the have-nots. And so on April 1st, April Fool's Day, 2014, we got a little bit more ridiculous and said, well, if they're taking over our streets, they'll probably just, take over Muni. If they're taking over Muni, then we should all write it. So it was a sort of a hoax campaign that Google had taken over Muni and now it was free. But freedom, is never free. It comes with the, total surveillance state, which is in the middle, the stilt walking surveillance robot. And it was a way to use sort of, creative theater, street theater and action to drive people to a hearing later that day at City Hall. So it was a tactic to make a bunch of news and drive people to actually turn out to City Hall and make some noise and try to get them out of our streets. We went on to look at other tech companies. This is a project, an action outside of Airbnb that we went in as a fake event company. My partner, Jadlyn Stahl, is very theatrically skilled and convincing, and this was our fake event planning company that got us in. And we held, an actual sharing economy with free pizza and folks talking about free services in the city inside their headquarters, while different folks that worked there looked on. I know Tiny was there. So we held the space for about an hour talking about the takeover of our housing and evictions happening because of Airbnb, who who knew it would take a pandemic to bring them down, but so yeah, this one, the tactic itself was really fun. These 20 banners, we just dropped them on the floor and they lifted up until their four-story skylight, and they had to get a crane later to get them down. So it was an interesting way to have a lasting action that they literally just couldn't get it out. They could kick us out, but they couldn't get us exposing them out of there. And I'm pretty spread out. I had a trans-Bay relationship for the first 5 years I was here, between San Francisco and Oakland. I've always worked in San Francisco. I lived in Oakland for 10 years, evicted twice, and now in Alameda. So spread out over the Bay. But this action was in Oakland when Uber was trying to take over the old Sears building downtown. So we took over the street for a First Friday event and projected onto the building, calling on folks to imagine what they would want in this space. And this is Tiny again, talking about Uber capitalism and it's how the way it decimates our people and cultures. And back then we were talking about a moratorium on evictions and rent hikes. We've been talking about it for a long time. Tiny's been talking about it way longer than me. And this was just like no rent hikes, and that's where we were back then. Like, please, we need real rent control. Now it's like we got to cancel the rents. We don't have money. We actually needed to cancel the rents a long time ago, because we know that we're paying off mortgages and paying for other people's retirements and their profits, and it's our labor, and there's no equity. So this is part of like people wrote in what they would like to see there. So there was a scroll of the different ideas and for what should be downtown: workers, co-ops, mutual aid-based services, spaces for neighborhood councils, things that we know are the things that we need right now. So I also work for Housing Rights Committee, doing communication strategy, some art activism, and some organizing. This campaign was against 2 anti-homeless and 2 anti-affordable housing measures. So a lot of my work is trying to tie together the tenant movement and houseless folks. The legislation is often different legislation, so the organizing isn't always together. And so I try to bring them together because our tenants get evicted and are still the base of tenant rights organizing. So this one, I was bringing in more community ritual. We've lost our community spaces. So this was a takeover of 22nd and Mission with poets and other artists and musicians, boom shake, drumming, and folks occupied the furniture, and they were doing domestic ritual by a building, affordable housing that had been burned down. Arson has happened a lot when there's tech booms. And most of us presume that was the case for this building at 22nd and Mission. So we hung a row of clotheslines with 65 outfits representing the folks that were burned out of their homes there. And we also put up about 40 stories of houseless folks and evicted folks, which was the least escalated part of the action, but I stayed about an hour and a half afterwards, and almost everyone who walked by stopped and read them, which really told me that when we take art out of these institutions and put them on the street, then more people sit with them and really read them and really digest the narratives in a way that wouldn't happen inside an art gallery. This action was with a kind of anonymous group of neighbors and tenants in the Mission, similar folks involved in several of the bus blockades, tying together so that the scooters landed on our streets, no permission, littered our streets everywhere, and we were making the connection of these tech toys having more rights on our sidewalks than houseless folks whose belongings were being thrown away every day. And also tying it to the gig economy and the waste that happens, because these things really only last a month and they're turned in, they're just e-waste after that. And the media they got the message. So it was a way that to think through how to tell a complicated, interconnected story in an action that actually did resonate with folks. Let's see here. One second. Let's try that again. Okay, is that working? Cool. And in this, we're using Tyvek suits and masks to talk about how toxic the tech savior industrial complex and that culture is, which I thought was, again, resonates to now. So some of these images are making me think, now we don't have enough supplies, so we wouldn't use this as a prop, but that we still need to dream of what that next world looks like. This beautiful the Poor Mag fam too, and drummers from BLO and such. And this one, people came together all the way from San Jose and Berlin because they were experiencing the same problems. Poor Mag fam, Decolonize Academy. And this is the last project I want to talk about is the one I'm working on now with Coalition on Homelessness. It's called Stolen Belonging. So it's an arts organizing project. It started with workshops with houseless folks, teaching them the camera skills, interview skills. Thank you, People Power Media, for helping teach those classes. Creative writing workshop with Jadelyn Stahl. And I helped teach them thinking through art actions. So it was a 3-part workshop that also, in it, we were going out and they were interviewing houseless folks on the streets about the belongings taken in the sweeps from survival gear and whatnot, but also there was a focus on the cherished objects that could never be replaced. Because we had heard many people getting their tents stolen and whatnot, and housies, as we are called by a lot of house folks, housies just really aren't thinking, are just seem to not care about a lot of survival gear. So a point of this project was to talk about really personal things to try to strike another nerve. And the importance of having houseless folks doing the interview is really vital to building trust. I've been working with Co for many years, but I've never been houseless. So it's important to have folks who've lived that experience be interfacing with these communities. Part of the project, I was taking photos of, after the interviews, having folks imagine their most precious object and gesturing with it. So it's about the empty space. It's about what's no longer there. It's about what you can't put a price on. So this is Memphis, and he's looking at his altar of his ex-husband who's no longer here. that he had that DPW just threw away. DPW is our Department of Public Works, that they work with the cops to implement the sweeps. You have Crystal on the left, and she's holding her dad's urn and ashes that they threw away. Stephen V in the middle. He was talking about his precious tools. That's what he cherished and loved every day that were taken. Veronica on the right was talking about her rings from her kids that were stolen. You can see the tan lines on her fingers still. And this built to a larger creative action at DPW, where we hung the stories with these tags, because they don't bag and tag. So it's a play on a practice that they don't actually do. One, they shouldn't be taking the items in the first place. So all the stories of the cherished belongings were on these tags. And we organize houseless folks to turn out and demand that they get their things back. This is a short video that I'm going to end on that kind of talks a little bit more about the integrating research from houseless folks and arts and organizing to expose what the city's doing.
I'm a former DBW, and I was working there recently. The company and the supervisors would say if to throw the belongings away.
But once you've decided that you've been ordered by police to confiscate their stuff,
yes,
do you give them any sort of receipt? Do you bag and tag it? Or does it just go in the back of the truck?
They just toss it whenever that looks good to them. They go sell it on the weekend.
Who sells it?
The DBW workers.
23 people so far have come out here that I know have not gotten one item back.
Everyone has a human right to housing. Everyone has a human right to mental health services. Everyone has a human right to medical.
I mean, if any of this happened to a house person, you can be damn sure there will be some kind of consequence.
Right. So if you have any questions, oh, I'm sorry, slow down. I'm seeing that now. I couldn't see it before. So sorry, interpreters. Thank you, Margarita, for being here for us. I apologize. Another thing we got to talk about is ableism in the movement. I'm going to turn it over to Melanie to show her amazing work.
I do have help from Amir, who I think will put my slideshow up. My name's Melanie Cervantes. I'm here in San Leandro, just east of Oakland, and I'm really just grateful to be here, and thank you for the invitation, Leslie. Can we get the slideshow up? We can skip that slide. Next slide. I know we did, go to the next one. I know the land acknowledgement was done. So I am one half of a project that my partner and I started in 2007 called Dignidad Rebelde. And we really have evolved over time, but came together because we were both making art and already had some experience working with community-based orgs, had done you know, our own work, I think, within our college experiences, doing kind of campus activism. And by the time we met in 2005, had our own distinct practices. Next slide. The thing that I think really brought us together in terms of like moving away from our individual art practices and kind of being just kind of two distinct people in the same space, making our work was the commonalities that we had in terms of our politic and the pivotal moments that shaped us when we were young people. So when the Zapatistas rose up to declare war against the state of Mexico because they knew the devastation that NAFTA would bring to their territories. We were both teenagers, like 17 years old. And it was the first time in our lifetimes that we had seen a social movement emerge, you know, in real time. We had, I think up until that point, maybe had really much more experience learning about, you know, the social movements that happened in our, you know, when our parents were young. And so the Zapatistas were really formative, I think, for us in informing also how we identified, you know, as Chicanos, I think at the time. And I think additionally, the Chicana feminists who brought an intersectional lens, whose critiques of what was often referred to as just the Chicano movement, and which, you know, could often be critiqued as patriarchal, really helped shape how we looked at the world and how we kind of analyzed the problems that we were confronting in our communities, that are, you know, our families had gone through. And I think that really helped cement what was driving us and how we would do our work and how we would kind of proceed to work with community-based organizations. You know, we have work that we produce that just, you know, is work that we like, but we often like to work collectively, whether we're working with small grassroots organizations or national networks, or even other groups of artists. You know, we're part of a larger cooperatives and councils that allow us to have the strength of relationship to be able to do more. You know, I think the theory of change and, you know, just at a really fundamental, we believe movement building is going to be what moves us through to a better place and really reshapes the world, and that the art is not a vanguard, you know, that we're just one part, you know, we're one grain of sand in that movement, and that we contribute to movements from that perspective, you know, knowing that we can just add to the toolbox, you know, we bring that and we share it. You know, I think in addition to making sure that the art that we produce gets back into people's hands, we also understand that the skill sets and the, you know, the actual practice of making the work, that is also a goal for us, that we want to empower people to be able to be part of that process, because I believe everyone has art in them. What kind of art is the question, and if they have the opportunity to let it emerge is another. Next slide. So I just wanted to share one project, one small little example, I think, of how we do the work. And I think there's something to learn from this moment that I picked. So in 2017, probably a year after quitting a full-time job and career in philanthropy, I set out to just do this artwork full-time, and I started not feeling well. And I started to go to the doctor to try to figure it out. I had like a chest pain, and that turned out just to be from carrying a heavy backpack when I was traveling. But luckily that heavy backpack got me to get an x-ray which showed that shadow. And, you know, after a period of several months, I found out that I had a really rare form of lung cancer on my 40th birthday. I was able to have surgery and remove the tumors and remove the lymph nodes that also had cancer, and have had clear scans since then. And in fact, have to kind of put a scan on hold because of the inability for the healthcare systems to really do kind of those routine checks at this moment. But there was something, I think, that happened because through the time that I was recovering from the surgery, I did a lot of what the world is having to do now. Like I had to isolate. You know, the danger was that even if I caught a cold, that it could potentially turn into pneumonia, and that pneumonia could have a lot of complications and I could end up in the hospital and die. And so I went through this period where I didn't see really anyone but my partner, maybe one other person. But it was, you know, a singular experience. Not that other people don't experience, but unlike now, you know, like, you know, the world is going through this, but then I was kind of going through it alone. And so there was like the whole emotional and mental part of dealing with that. And there was the physical part because, you know, my practice is mainly in the screen printing process, which is very physical. Like I couldn't do that. So during that time, what I looked at a lot of work. You know, I think before I ever thought that I could make art, I was a huge fan of other people's work. Next slide. So if we go to the next slide, one of the artists whose work I'm always looking at is Emory Douglas, the Minister of Culture for the Black Panther Party. And I think felt like the time that I spent looking at his works had really planted deep ideas in my mind. I really started to notice how he depicted the protagonists from the community in his works with such dignity and power. And I think that left a really kind of lasting impression on me. And so when I went to sit down to design a poster in response to the dominant use of suffering in the mainstream media, you know, at that time, I think there was the cover of Time or Newsweek, where the little girl is being, you know, separated from her mom, and she's crying, you know, bawling, tears in her face. And I had an issue because there was images being deployed of like children on the ground inside cages, and I think it got to the point where I was like, there's something that this does in its repetition that is both disempowering and harmful and toxic, you know. And I think the underlying assumption is that it's and maybe not always the case, you know, depending on the outlet that's using it, but that could potentially make people who are unsympathetic sympathetic. And I don't agree with that strategy. I don't think, you know, kind of putting out suffering images is going to make people feel like, if they don't value people's humanity before that, I don't think that's going to transform people to believe, oh, this person is, you know, worthy of that respect and their humanity. So I saw that in this work, and it really shaped the poster. You know, it made me say, like, you know, I want to make an image that reflects, you know, all of the immigrant families that I've ever met, the families that I came from, you know, the ones that continue to struggle, that are continuing to find a place to survive. There's such dignity and strength and protection of the family. And so that came out in the piece. And even at that point, next slide, I couldn't produce these alone. There's just no physical way. And, you know, I think I went from having an ability to then becoming disabled in that ability. And so I went back to the thing that I feel like is almost always the answer to any of the challenges that I'm facing, and that to bring more people into it, do it together. And so we opened up our studio for the course of a week or so, and people that had never printed, that had never really done anything, helped produce 250 of these posters that we intended on getting to people that could put them in public spaces to kind of make a public declaration of solidarity. And we took donations. You can see on the left, there's like a little donation jar. And so with the 250 posters that we printed as a community, which was really wonderful because we did most of it in the studio. And then I think we took like the last 50 or so to a community shop, and we used the back of the shop to invite people. We had like little kids. I think there are pictures of the kids. Next slide. Here, they were standing on chairs and helping me print. And we printed the last color together to just kind of put a bow on the whole effort of doing this collectively. And it was really wonderful because, the impetus for making the piece was really about the young people. So to have young people, these little humans producing the work that is a sign of solidarity was really wonderful. Next slide. So, we did that, and we were able to leverage all of those prints and get them out into the community locally. And with what we raised in donations, we were able to make 13,000 posters and stickers that we distributed for free to anyone who requested them across the country. And next slide. And so people were using them at actions and marches, and the distribution methods, because it was decentralized and it kind of like empowered people to do what they thought would be a good strategy where they're at. They varied. Next slide. From everything from people who teach, using that graphic as an opportunity to really address the issue and have discussions, and it sends stickers out so they could give their whole class stickers. And I think it helped create a conversation piece, but it helped involve people too in really kind of pushing back against particularly the visual narrative that was being deployed in mainstream media, and for people to really talk back against that. Next slide. I think that's it. Yeah. So for me, I think a lot about this moment, and I think about the lessons that I learned in my own kind of early isolation as I was recovering from surgery. And I have the benefit of like looking back and saying, okay, I remember what it was like to go out for the first time again. I remember going to a community restaurant, Reams, which fair people know, and sitting down for the first time with people that I knew, and it was such a joyful moment. And I also remember what it was like being inside and still wanting to be a part of the fight for dignity, right? And I think that's the moment that we're confronted with now, and why it's important to open up space to be creative. I loved seeing Leslie's presentation. It's so many just brilliant interventions. And I think, having these opportunities to share and thinking about these national campaigns, it is that opportunity to push us to think creatively about how we move towards dignity, because it's rough out there. It is so rough out there. And, it's hard when you have people in governing positions that don't love us at all. It feels like they never loved us at all. And we really are who we can look to. We have each other. And so, yeah, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit.
So beautiful. We have a lot to learn from you and what you went through definitely in this time, and a lot of thinking I want to do with you on folks that can't be outside during this crisis and after, and how we work together more. So their skills on inside are shared outside. So Tiny, I know you have to get off at 7. Is that true?
I can push it a little bit. We'll
Okay.
see. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Yeah.
And then we'll open it to Q&A. So everyone that's got these burning questions, make sure you put them in the chat box. If you don't, I have lots of them. So.
I am that poverty scholar, that houseless mama, that houseless daughter. I am that poverty scholar. All those people you don't want to see, never want to be, look away from me. What you gonna do, arrest me? We're in your city. Yeah, I'm a poverty scholar, and I rock my jailhouse attire because me and my po mama did jail time for the poverty crime of being unhoused in this occupied indigenous holler. I'm a poverty scholar, melanin challenged daughter of a strong Boricua mama for without whom there would be no me, a mama soltera and a welfare queen. So that's what I call my slam bio. I open it up. I do want to say thank you to the first peoples of this land for continuing to hold it and to hold it 527 years later. Shouts out to Mama Karina Gold and all the other powerful warriors still here after the genocides and the pandemics that already happened, brought by the same colonizers that we could argue brought this moment now. And I want to, when we're talking about art, first of all, just big love to Melanie and the beautiful work that you've done that I've watched you do all these years, to Leslie, the beautiful work, to all the sheroes and heroes and trans rose out there doing this work all the time. I love what you said, Melanie, about, you know, a lot of the art is the art that we don't necessarily see. And I immediately now have to bring up my mama. For without whom there be no me. I come from I'm a daughter of a very tortured, destroyed, mixed race orphan whose body was molested over 210 times by the time she was 3 years old. And people might wonder always why I bring up my mama. Well, I'm a good indigenous daughter, and I held my mama close to the day that she transitioned the other side, Ibaye mama. But as an artist, she was never really able to be considered an artist. As a poor woman, as a houseless, disabled woman, it was really funny because she loved art. She was also a caregiver and a revolutionary, but never thought of herself that way, but wanted so badly to be recognized as an artist. Tried to apply to art schools, but the checks always bounced, as some people who might read my book, Criminal Poverty, Growing Up Homeless in America. By the way, I don't make money on it, but it's a good read about poor women and generations on this occupied land. But I say that to say that there's ways in which the art world, specifically in Americlan, is intentionally silencing and intentionally off-putting and marginalizing, to the point where they even have terms like outsider art, you know, and folk art. And these are just ways of fetishizing indigenous and poor artists that have been making art forever, making art in our soup, making art in our, you know, our recipes and in our cloth. Shout out to Ingrid de Leon, one of the indigenous poverty scholar, Poor Magazine family, who's a costura, who sews more beautiful than anything I could ever imagine, but, you know, makes suits for rich white people in Frisco, and right now isn't making any money. Shouts out to all of the women and the men who continue to make art and aren't seen as artists. But back to my ma, you know, we would make art and sell it on the street, and people would never consider us artists. And I found out later that there's a well-known New York artist who made a video about us without ever asking us, and depicting us as a houseless, mentally ill mother and daughter. And literally, you know, getting a film into several film, you know, shows about our life. And, you know, people might think that, oh, that was just this or that, but that actually happens all the time. And so I think the work that I do, and the reason, people wonder, why do you wear the soiled jail suit? I did 3 months in Santa Rita for the act of being unhoused in this occupied land. And that's nowhere near my brother, Joey Villarreal. Shout out to, all the brothers and sisters behind the plantation prison, the razor wires. But I do it to uninvisibilize people like me. In my slam bio, when I say the people you don't see never want to be, look away from me, those are real. People perpetuate the violent act of looking away from unhoused bodies every day, saying things like, oh, it's too much, or I can't deal with that, or, the charity industrial complex, when they're done thinking that poverty is sexy. Shout out to my brother Leroy Moore and Crip Hop Nation, and the ways that, there are many of these, what I call philanthropimps, that no longer even will utter myself or Leroy's name in their mouth because they say we're too radical. And we call out the backstory behind the philanthropimps and the endowments who make money on giving money, who make businesses out of profiting off of poor people's bodies. And similarly, though, the point of the work that I do is, like my mama taught me, is that life is art. And as poor people, our art is our survival, and our life is our art. And so we would make art called The Art of Homelessness, where we would take people through docent tours through the homeless encampments and squatted storefronts we were living in. And it was powerful, extremely cutting edge, if we had been in art school or in New York or some other kind of thing. But at the time, people just thought we were crazy, right? We were called, I have another poem, I say, anti-social workers and case manglers call me crazy, lazy, dumb, and a bum, because my knowledge don't come from the institution. So as some people know, at 11 years old, I had to drop out of formal institutions of learning and enroll full-time in the School of Hard Knocks, which I'm proud to say I graduated with a PhD in poverty. Not to glamorize poverty at all. Again, it almost killed me. And but I learned at 11 things. I didn't learn fake history about the United Snakes of Americlan and who my savior was, but I learned how to file eviction papers and go to eviction court to keep mom and me in apartments for a little bit longer, so that we wouldn't have to stay as long in bus benches and shelters and park benches in our cars. I learned about how to file foreclosure documents just to support me and mama and my grandma and other folks on the street. I learned about all kinds of poverty crimes, because if I didn't learn them, I wouldn't stay alive. And at 18 is when I was incarcerated for tickets that piled up. But as I know you conscious folks, and most of the people watching know, that it's a crime to be unhoused. Which brings us to cancel rent every day on this stolen land, people. Yeah, we don't believe in the lie of rent. Shout out to my brother Mutiel de Silencio, Israel Munoz, all the youth scholars at Decolonize, Juju, and so many more who work in the Poor Magazine family, the Homefulness Village. At Homefulness, we're building houses and a radio station and a school, and we're actually housed the first 4 families, and none of us pay any rent. So I want to say that again, none of us pay any rent, because rent is a lie. And how do we do that? It's not magic. It's extremely hard. We teach young folks with race and class privilege about the notion of radical redistribution and something I call community reparations, which means that unlike the cult of independence, we practice interdependence, which means if I see you, I am enmeshed in your life, that I cannot practice the violent act of looking away. And because you are human and I am human, our survival is entwined. And so we teach young folks who've been taught wealth hoarding, accumulation, and land stealing as a model of success their whole lives. We don't blame anybody. We're all capitalized in this stolen land, where Mama Earth is seen as a commodity. We teach them about the notion of these forms of radical redistribution. And we, and through this process, have begun our own process of community reparations. And to date, we raised enough money, enough bloodstained dollars into love-stained dollars to buy this small part of Mama Earth here in Deep East Huichin so we could unsell it and turn it into homefulness, a homeless people solution to homelessness. We model ourselves after the Zapatistas in Chiapas, as Melanie brought up. And shout out to Melanie and Dignidad Rebelde, who did a beautiful poster for us 4 years ago when we started this project. The Shack Dwellers Union in South Africa, Move Africa, long live John Africa. A lot of people glamorize Move Africa now, but at the time was a lot of neighbors and haters who didn't understand what they were doing and called the Philadelphia mayor and police and said that they were too radical, you know. So I really want to just lift up this notion of canceling rent, because I feel like at this time, we are at a crossroads. And people are now starting to understand and overstand these notions of interdependence. They call it mutual aid. I didn't even know what that meant. We've been doing Sliding Scale Cafe and Roofless Radio and feeding the people and giving people supplies since the beginning of Poor Magazine's life. But people are now starting to understand and overstand that that's our only way of surviving as a people. That if we don't actually come together in a real way, not just a charity industrial complex, crumb thrown at you, a scarcity model way. But if we come at each other actually with understanding that we are all entwined, that is the only way we're going to make it on Mama Earth, who is already overtaxed and under duress. So I know that we're running out of time, and I just want to say thank you all liberators who are actually out there listening, who are even thinking about the canceling of rent. And I want to put this notion in your brains. Land trusts, they still rooted in settler colonial laws. And what we are doing here is what we call liberation of land trust, which is walking in tandem with our brothers and sisters from Segurite Land Trust. Shout out to their and our, who we asked permission first before we even started this. But liberation of land trust unsells Mama Earth so that there is never a commodifying. There is never a flipping, and then there never is a changing of a narrative that includes an people's survival and Mama Earth's survival so that we can all thrive. Oh.
Thank you for that, Tiny. I don't know if you wanted to show any of these slides or not. You covered it all pretty much.
We're doing radical redistribution and interdependence in the streets right now. Like we always do. It's just now we're doing it literally 5 days a week. Shout out to my brother Israel, to the youth scholars. I'd love to show a couple if you have a second.
Yep.
We need people's help. We need your hoarded toilet paper. We needed your masks. We need your gloves. If you want to kick down some cash, we always appreciate it. Poor Magazine is in fact Poe. But yeah, and then we put out the Poverty Scholarship book this year, along with some other powerful Poor Press books. Again, shout out to Leroy Moore, Crip Hop Nation, Black Disabled Ancestors, Audrey Candy Corn, Angel Heart. There's so many beautiful authors. We can keep flipping the slides. You don't have to. You'll see some of the authors. Shout out to Vivian and Moteado. There's actually, that was the poster by Dignidad Rebelde. That's our right there. Beautiful poster. Thank you guys. We love you. That's homefulness, except now we've actually got walls on the homes. They're mama houses. The next slide is the Stolen Land Hoarded Resources tours that Leslie brought up. We go to wealth hoarding neighborhoods and actually share the medicine of radical redistribution with as many people as possible. That's me on the Philadelphia main line. You know, they didn't always open the door, let's just say. And the sadder part is, most of the time, those bees weren't even home because that was their second or third or vacation home. That's the terrifying part, right?
Right.
And in this time when we're sheltering in place, and one of my favorite lines is, how you going to shelter in place when you don't got a place? So one of my calls out and shouts out is to the wealth hoarders. Stop just talking about the politricksters in the hotels. Talk about the wealth hoarders and their empty rooms and houses and mansions and condos that are all over the bay, all over Turtle Island. I saw with my own eyes. I see with my own eyes right here in Piedmont, right there in Beverly Hills. shout out to Auntie Frances and the Self-Help Hunger Program, one of my co-leaders in the Stolen Land Hoarded Resources tours. We witnessed with our own eyes. All of these are empty and they need to actually open them up. There's the beautiful one we did at Salesforce. Some of y'all know there's me and Auntie Frances in the tent. Let's just say we walked into Salesforce and demanded something we call Tech Reparations Fund to be immediately implemented when Salesforce CEO put out a $30 million study to, wait for it, study homelessness. We could build 5, we could build 10 homefulness projects with that 30 mil. But this fool wants to study us again. Like I always say, no matter how many times you study me, it don't give me a home. What? There's us doing radical redistribution in the streets. There's Auntie Frances and Momi. We're at the encampments. We go literally 5 days a week all across the Bay. We serve hot meals. And also there's my brother Motiado. We do the vitamins. We do basically shout out to Michelle Steinberg, to all the folks who've kicked down Michelle, Kim, our Poor Magazine Solidarity family who make this possible, to all the donors out there. We love you. Because
do you want to play the vid or are you good?
Huh?
You want to play the video?
My name's Kimo Umu. I'm part of Decolonize Academy, as well as Poor Magazine, and we'll be feeding the homeless during the COVID-19 crisis.
There we go. So what do we have here today? You want to play the food, sir? You want to play food? I got you, no worries.
We also have apples and oranges.
Here you go. What's the next stop? It's hard right now, and we got to help each other, you know? The other ways, how are we going to survive?
I got plates, I got bread, I got oranges, apples, and then we got a kit. Do you need like beans and rice? Sure, yeah. And all that.
It's very stressful and it's very isolating, and it really lets you know that you'll never get the support in any capacity from a corporation like you will from your community.
Oh. Love you. We freaking love you. We need a hug. The reality is we are the homeless people. And we're sharing, radically sharing, practicing interdependence like we always have since Mama D was living in park benches and street corners. And so, yeah, behind this COVID-19 crisis, it ain't nothing new for us. It's just now we redistributing masks and gloves, sanitary napkins and other things, because the reality is just because you on the street, it doesn't mean your life doesn't matter. So for those of you who might be watching, just know, radically redistribute some of that hoarded toilet paper.
Okay, keep doing the good work. All right.
Although you are inside right now, you're in the house in quarantine, there's a lot of ways you can be helping out. You know, we have Poor Magazine, our website. You could find out a lot of different ways to help out on there. Big community reparations. A lot of money goes to the stuff that we're doing right now. Is the food that we're giving away right now. We get that money, we get those resources. Like my mom said, the hoarded toilet paper, and we redistribute it to people who need it, the people who actually don't have a backup case of toilet paper, actually don't have a house to be financially stable in. So thank you so much, guys.
All right. Y'all have a good day. God bless.
All right. So we are out of time, I guess. We can stay on a little longer. I would love to have a little bit of a Q&A with y'all, but Tiny, I know you gotta go. So.
If people want to reach me, they can hit up poormag@gmail.com, or yeah, Poor Magazine's online and we're out here all the time. We love you, fam.
All right. Melanie, can you stay on at all?
Yes.
Okay. So first question, because I don't see any over here in the chat box. I know, the last time that I remember a lot of energy coming from different sectors, different issues was around Tahrir Square, the Democracia Real Ya movement, anti-austerity movement in Greece, and building up to what was called Occupy here, with a very significant, important critique about decolonizing that, you know, that a lot of issues of class, race came up in that, and ableism as well. So how, and now we're facing like a time where, like, you know, real estate, corporations, they're ready to take everything while folks are really vulnerable. But on the other pole, we have so many people ready to act and to see themselves interconnected and to make art together, even across distance. So how do you see that we come together to decolonize art and organizing and our organizations towards a more interdependent, oriented society where all are valued and seen to have dignity?
Yeah, I think, you know, there's a lot of challenges with like the places where, you know, a lot of places have these shelter in place orders. You know, it looks different in every municipality and county and city and states, but you know, just even initially the fact that not everyone has reliable or good internet access, right? Because one of the things that I started to think about and wanted to do and have done a couple of were online presentations. You know, like, let's say for the most part, I've done a good amount here in the Bay in person. I've done a lot at universities. And I was like, you know, how is this moment open up the possibility of just sharing with folks and maybe trying to use the tools that exist to be able to both share information, but also create social closeness versus social distance, right? Because we need physical distance, but we don't need social distance. We need social closeness at this time. We need community. We need to be able to interweave things. And so, like, the idea that I had was, you know, if we can build to doing workshops, like I started by doing a couple of different presentations, which were really much more of an introduction to me, because even people who follow my work, you know, the first time I think we had 150 people sign up, and people that I know, like, they didn't know a lot of what I presented. It was a new presentation about my story of how I became an artist. And, you know, that taught me something, right? I was like, even when we think we know each other, there's so much more room to connect. And, you know, it was 2 hours long, like the actual program. And we still had people that, you know, we just stayed and hung out. And to me, that showed me that people are hungry for connection. And, you know, when I had announced it, folks had kind of responded to social media posts. I asked, like, what do you want to see? What do you want to do? And so there's folks that said, you know, we want presentations on historical, like, art and movement work. And then there were other folks that are like, teach me how to make things, teach me skills, hard skills. And so I was like, okay, let's do both, you know? And so when I was like trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I had a lot of ideas for like how to do the work, but then I was like, but, you know, in any organizing, you have to start with the basics, and that's just getting to know each other. And so for me, I was like, well, the opportunity is, let's get to know each other, and we're going to keep building, and we're going to build community as we go, because the same people want to keep coming back, and new people come, right? It's just like anything else, right? And so that that I can help skill share the way people have skill shared for me, because I don't have formal training as an artist. I have a lot of people that have taught me what they knew. And I'm like, that's how you make traditions live. That's how they stay alive. And the tradition of political artwork that's connected to social movements is one that we feel really humbled to come into the long history of people that have done that. So yeah, right now I think I'm like, the next kind of online offerings will be stencil workshops, because I think for the most part, people will have the material or some kind of material that can be used to do that. And actually seeing the Cancel Rant Fest, like I was like, well, that should be, you know, the theme. We should do
Yeah.
a cancel around this call. So that's kind of I think that those are good examples, even of like, this is kind of the organic process for how, and you know, like we decide to do something, right? It's never in a vacuum. It's always in relationship to things that are going on, and the movements that are emerging from like all these different places. And then, you know, the opportunity is to intersect them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I've been watching throughout some of the Cancel Rent Fest. The last talk was called Regenerative Social Imagination, and it had Sam Cooke on, who was talking about Indigenous people's worldview and how art is at the center of Indigenous life. It's not an extracurricular activity, and talking about the value of intangible heritage. And I'm sure you probably know that art is sidelined in a lot of our movements. It's an afterthought. Sometimes it's decorative. Whereas, you know, we both, and Tiny, like all of us have a practice where it's very integrated into the organizing work we do, into the communities we're trying to build. So how do you think this is a time to sort of reassert art into the center?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have constraints. Like we can't be in the streets right now, right? We can make art though, like, and I mean, I've seen memes. This is totally not my original thinking. People are like, you know, the next time you want to be dismissive of art, think of what you're doing while you're staying home. You're listening to music, you're watching movies, you're reading books. Like, people are, I think, largely looking to art already. So the question is, what kind of art? And does it uphold the status quo? You know, for all those people that say, oh, but my art's not political. Every artist and every piece of art is political. And it either upholds the status quo or it does something else, right? Or challenges it. And so that, I think that's the opportunity, right? Like, we know folks are in that moment, and not everyone, you know. I think it's important to say that the class dimension, right? That there's people that are, you know, people in my family that are like, oh, I just lost my job, and so they're hiring to have more people to do the delivery or work in the grocery store, so that's going to be where I go look. And because they're forced to, you know, take on the danger, you know, like, and even I made a piece that was about just expressing the gratitude for the people that are, you know, that are doing the farm work, that are in the meat packing industry, you know, doing logistics, the, you know, people that are cleaning the streets and cleaning the hospitals and are at great risk, the nurses, you know, there is an immense amount of gratitude. And the point of the piece really was, and the best way to show gratitude is for me to be in solidarity with their organizing.
Yeah.
Right. Like, if we're going to show gratitude, you know, clapping is beautiful. It's an expressive thing, and we can do more.
Yeah.
And we can do more from where we're at. You know, there's ways, you know, whether it's observing the boycotts or like actively signing on and figuring out strategies. I think that's the question. You know, like, what are the creative interventions and how do we plug in? And that's always a movement question, right? You know, everyone has a role, and what are the possible roles they can have? You know, it can be from everything from just, you know, I think of historically, like during the grape strike with the UFW, the people who all they did was observe the boycott and not buy grapes, like they had an important role, and it was like maybe kind of like an easy thing to do. And then there were people that did so much more. They were doing the frontline organizing. They were physically in danger from the violence of, you know, police and the growers. So I think that's the question that is posed to us now. Like, how are we gonna participate and, you know, in the kind of creative space? Like, what can we bring? Because the challenge is that we're distanced from each other, right? but there have been many challenges, and I think that's the I gotta go back to that. I think that's the beauty of the collective when you bring enough people together, enough minds, enough hearts, enough lineages, because I believe our ancestors are here, you know, standing around us, standing behind us, that will come up with strategies. And yeah, I think I do think it's a interesting time. And you know, one other thing that someone said during one of the talks I gave was like, you know, I just feel so spent emotionally and spiritually. It's hard to find the creative reserves. And I thought that was a really good question to answer. And I mean, question and challenge. And I think there is some need to talk about this process of grief that we're experiencing worldwide, right? And we're all in different stages of that.
Right.
And that, I think, you know, for the healers, like that, the medicine people that can help us through that, like that's also, it's part of the arts, right? It's larger because it's part of the culture. It is that often the thing that's more intangible, but so critical, right? Because our spirits are hurting, right? We're experiencing this collective spiritual hurt. And I think every day new harms happen, you know, every time the president opens his mouth, new harms happen and have real repercussions. It's not just words, you know, those words translate into actions. We see that with all the kind of like xenophobia and anti-Asian violence that's happening. And we know how politicians are feeding into that.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like we have to wrap up soon. I think we need a whole other session to really start digging deeper into art across distance. And also I want to bring up, like, people have reminded me that it's okay to do nothing. It's okay to not be productive. Part of this cancel rent, when we were like, how do we connect all the, you know, cancel all the cages, cancel the rent, cancel that. And we're like, it's capitalism. Can we cancel capitalism is what we're like taking steps to get to. Because that drive to like, oh, I have to produce. I can't just do nothing and sit here and grieve is part of our toxic culture. I do want to thank you for being here. I would love to brainstorm with you on how to tease out that next session. I'm going to end with showing a few slides from April 1st, Cancel Rent Day of Action, from many different places. It was a call to action by many groups, including Homes for All and Housing Rights Committee and Anti-Displacement Coalition and folks in New York, Housing Justice Coalition in New York. Like all the groups locally, statewide, and nationally have really synced in the housing movement, and many movements are syncing together and getting on the same page about shared demands and the need to lift up other movements, you know, laborers with no rights, and folks stuck in detention centers, and folks stuck in jails, and, you know, folks on the front lines with no protection, who are workers that need to be, one, they need to be able to take time off, and two, they need to be getting paid double time, if not more, for having to endure this and keep working. So I want to share my screen with some of that, and then we'll close out in about 5 minutes. Let's see here. Screen. So this was the call to action poster I made for Homes for All and Housing Rights Committee, starting to think through what you can do at home or in your communities with little resources, or that anyone can do, to take pics holding a sign of the shared demands, post window signs, hang banners on your home or building if you feel comfortable, chalk, stencil, post to your neighborhood, sing, dance, do noise demos, respecting safe physical distance, post signs in your car, tell your friends and family to call the governor, get creative and have fun building solidarity across distance. And this, here's a few things that folks did across the country to participate. Some are already escalating to rent striking. This is LA, in LA, food not rent, assuring tenants that it's okay to prioritize yourself and food, not rent. This is the South Bronx Tenants Movement, Right to Counsel New York Coalition. I love that they're working with what they have. You know, you write your messages on newspapers, balloons. This is Amanda Preeb for Just Seeds, from Cindy Milstein on Instagram. So Just Seeds has many graphics, including Melanie's. You can download for free and put them up in your windows or on the streets. And then some people are doing, you know, things that you can do from home and sharing them out to your social networks and your friends. Because a lot of it is just like trying to get this to catch on. Everyone's sharing it. Everyone's talking about it. So friend Andy Blue and his grandmother. Folks are doing car protests and honking around the mayor's house in LA. Can't pay, won't pay, not now, not later. This is in Oakland. Governor Gavin Newsom canceled the rent. This is a virtual idea that I think would be really successful if done for real by Lift the Ban Coalition on, and because what this would do if done for real, that it shows your building is organized. It shows people have talked to their neighbors, learned their rights, and are willing to take a stand together. And this is we don't have time to talk about things to do across distance, but this is Allison Ihara Brown, Isabella Zizi, David Solnit got together. Peg Hunter helped shoot this is actually a video with 100 families in occupied Ohlone territory, called for by Indigenous Women of the Americas Defending Mother Earth and Idle No More SF Bay, where folks just, you know, take a letter. It's called a virtual banner. Take a letter and they spell out these messages. They made a video with it. Other folks projected it. So this is one idea of how you can get a collective of people together to be making messages and art together. Another one by 350 South Dakota. So here are our contact information for those watching on YouTube or still sticking with us on Zoom. Feel free to reach out, follow and support your artist. And if you're in an org that's fighting for justice, try to talk to them about centering the arts and culture, because it'll bring more people together. And remember, cancel the rent, homes for all. Sign up on cancelrent.us. There's a form on the Take Action page that if you sign up there, you can stay involved in the national campaign. We're going to keep building over the month to May 1st. People can't pay rent today. Couldn't pay rent April 1st. They're not going to be able to pay rent May 1st. This is a huge crisis. We don't just need these limited temporary eviction moratoriums, which means tenants have to go into debt and eventually pay it back later, which we know they never will be able to if they're not working. So get involved. We need this debt canceled. The banks need to take responsibility. They've caused this crisis for generations. Landlords and homeowners are getting mortgage relief, and it's not trickling down to renters. So, you know, for single homeowners, stand with renters. You know, if we all deserve housing, and that's the call for Homes for All. All right. Much love to you, Melanie. Shout out to Tiny. Thank you for joining us, Tiny, if you ever watch this again. And take care, all.